Welcome to Soulfire Wisdom with Kate Olson. As an evolving spirit and change adventure navigator, it is Kate's mission to empower and guide you on your path and inspire your truest passions. She will encourage you to share your gifts, speak your truth, and ignite your inner wisdom and purpose. She hopes to do so with a little humor and grace, and her own soulfire passion. Kate talks with amazing guests who have embraced the pursuit and are fanning the flames of their own passion, purpose, and soulfire wisdom. Now here's your host, Kate.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Soulfire Wisdom. And I usually say totally awesome, try something new, and talk about it Tuesday. But I've decided to change that up for the new year, and I'm starting a little early. So I may every once in a while have a totally awesome, try something new Tuesday. But from now on, I'm going to be doing tips, tricks, and triumphs. So this week, I'm going to give you a little tip. And that's on December 21st. Something kind of interesting is happening that hasn't happened for about 800 years. And that's the Christmas star, or what they call the Christmas star, is going to be visible in the sky. And what that really is, it's the conjunction between planets. I think it's Saturn and Jupiter. They come close enough that they almost look like they're touching, so they look like a big, big star. And that's going to be visible closer to the equator you are, but in the U.S. in the Southwest, if the skies are clear, we should be able to see that. So, yeah. Oh, and the best time to see it is just before the sun sets, when it's not quite dark yet. You should be able to see the Christmas star. So we have a great show planned for today. My guest is Victor Perton, and Victor is the founder of the Center for Optimism. And I had him on about this time last year, right after he had opened the Center for Optimism and released his book, Optimism, the Why and How, and we talked about optimism and what his hopes for the new center that he was opening were. Victor has a really interesting background. He was actually commissioner to the United States, which is kind of like ambassador, and he was a parliamentarian for 18 years, and he's been a barrister and an arbitrator and a mediator and a board member and a businessman. But he decided to go around the world asking people why they were optimistic. And this had to do with his ideas about leadership and success. And so I'm going to introduce Victor right now, and we're going to find out both how the Center for Optimism has been doing through 2020 and in general what he's up to. So good day, Victor. How are you?
Kate, I am fantastic, and it is wonderful to see you. I just love your soul fire, purpose, and passion. So it is great to be back with you today. In fact, you can see the coloring behind me. It's the dawn. It's a lighthouse of optimism in the fog of pessimism. And you, Kate, epitomize that to me.
And you epitomize optimism for me. Even your new glasses and your sport jacket that you're wearing there, it's all so optimistic. So
It's the coloring. This one, the trend towards the circular economy. I was doing a television interview, and the interviewer had some quite colourful glasses, and I said, "Where do you get them?" And it's a Sydney startup that does the circular economy. So they're recycled plastic glasses, and the benefit is it does match my orange blazer.
yes. So first, is there anything I left out on the synopsis of your background that you'd like to tell the audience? And then what's new since last year with the Center for Optimism?
Well, the past, there's nothing else you have to add. I think it was such a complimentary introduction. I couldn't add anything to it. What's happened? Well, as you know, when we were talking, we had opened the world's first shop front for optimism. Well, what did COVID do for us on a shop front? We had to close the actual shop, but we have grown so much online. So for us, we now have 5,500 members in 69 countries. We had our first Bulgarian join the other day. And despite COVID and everything else, we have just grown and grown, both in our reach and our mission. And just this weekend, we launched a new course called The Habits of the Optimist. And in my speeches over the last year, I normally talk about the why of optimism. Well, in the how, we share the habits, the smiling, the laughter, the greetings, the gratitude. And two friends of mine, expert in the education field, one of them having had to close her business as well. And so we've created an animated Habits of the Optimism course. So that's the newest of the new. We had the Governor General, the Australian head of state, on the other day, and we had 10 children asking him stories about how he had got to where he'd got. And Kate, the blessing to me was he opened up and he said, well, look, it's not just because I've got the host is the man from the Centre for Optimism, but all my life I've been an optimist. So we've had lots and lots of good things happening, Kate. Despite the fact that here in Melbourne, where we're headquartered, we had the longest lockdown of any city in the world.
Yes, but as you were telling me before, it worked, didn't it?
We are on zero COVID now. I mean, there's COVID in the people being evacuated from other countries. So there's still a stream of Australians who want to come back, who've been living overseas. So there's a little bit of COVID in secure facilities. But yeah, we've reached a zero COVID spread at the moment. So it's still a bit funny, Kate. I'm so used to not going to dinner with people. I'm so used to not going out for coffee. You almost sort of think when someone says, come and have a coffee, you're still thinking, oh my God, do I have to wear a mask? And what do I need to do? But in fact, in a zero COVID community, you can actually sit opposite someone without a mask.
Yes. So your business grew and flourished during the shutdown, but how did the economy in general in Australia fare? Is it?
It's hard to tell.
Back?
It's hard to tell. There's the government, like most governments in the Western world, pumped a lot of money into the economy. So employers got subsidies to keep people on. People on welfare benefits actually got more money than they got before COVID. Interest rates have fallen. So there's no doubt that there's a drop in gross domestic product because of the lockdowns and people not being able to go to work and not to make things. But it's not severe, and the view is that we'll probably be back to pre-COVID levels sometime next year. But the challenge is the challenge of optimism, the challenge of innovation, the challenge to what's new. So, we had in Australia, we had those huge bushfires,
Yes.
wildfires in January, which were thought to be the worst in history.
Yes.
So we've had communities that have gone from, assault by fire, and then assault by flood, and then COVID. And so, the whole community is really coming together in how can we support those people. And, there's been a lot of a stronger community. Remember Nietzsche, the German philosopher, said, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. I think in the end, we will be a stronger community for having gone through this once in a century pandemic. I think, when you look at it, people have looked out for their neighbours more. They've probably talked to their family more, using Zoom and conferencing. My family had its biggest family party in 1937 before we were dispersed across the world to Australia, America, Germany, and elsewhere. Well, we came together on Zoom for the second biggest family party ever because they all joined in. So, and we've actually done a study on people's post-COVID better normal. So we asked people, 3,500 people around the world, what they've learnt from COVID and what they are going to carry through. And we got 1,500 answers, which was everything from, one lady said, I love setting my own temperature. I mean, what office can compete with that, Kate? To, I love getting my lunch from the fridge. I love taking my break in the garden. One man, a law partner, as his little girl was growing up 2 years ago, was hardly at home. He's got a little boy, through the first year of little boy, he's been home most of the time. So, you've had a strengthening of family and the like. So COVID's had that extraordinary mixture of, obviously, in some parts of the world, thousands and thousands of people have died. But on the other hand, many other people and their families and communities have been strengthened as a result.
Yes, I definitely think it has strengthened innovation in people thinking of ways to accomplish things they just did by rote before. You did it this way because you'd always done it that way.
You hop on a plane, Melbourne to Sydney, is the third most trafficked route on earth. Because Melbourne and Sydney business folk would just fly down for a 1-hour meeting. Now they've discovered you don't have to spend an hour getting to the airport, an hour commuting into Sydney or Melbourne, waiting in the terminal, contributing to the green, to carbon emissions. You can actually just sit at your desk and have a really good meeting, look into someone's eyes, and not waste a whole day for a 1-hour meeting. Yes,
I think that's definitely, and a lot of employers were resistant to people working from home, and because they thought, they wouldn't be working, and they found out that they are just as or more productive. So,
well, that trust is interesting. I was reading. Funny enough, I found something from 1996 from the Melbourne University Philosophy Department by reading an article out of Switzerland. But this lovely professor from the University of Melbourne said this: trust is the optimistic belief that the person making the promise will carry out their promise. And I think employers and everyone else has seen that left to their own devices, workers have in many cases produced more rather than less working from home, not having to shower and dress in an office outfit and commute for an hour. I'm on the board of a company, we've got one of the highest performing call centres in Australia. Would you know that the customer perception of the call centre even improved as our call centre people were working from home? The view was always, if you're in that sort of battery hen type environment and talking to each other, that it lifted the emotions. But in fact, we've found that our call centre people are even more empathetic and sound more empathetic when working from the quiet of home with their cat sitting on their lap or their children nearby.
Yeah, I think that's true. It has produced some interesting, I don't know, side effect situations, but I think we've all kind of gotten used to that.
So, Kate, tell me about you over the last year. What have you learned about yourself during COVID that's made you stronger for the life ahead?
Well, I have learned that things will happen, changes come about, and you can and will adapt. I actually moved during COVID. I moved from Washington, sold my home and moved to Arizona. So it was a big change, and a lot happened. And some of it, I thought I'd have a hard time adapting to. And especially during COVID, I thought it would be harder to adapt. And it turned out that since I was adapting already, I think it was maybe easier than it would have been if everything would have been normal.
Yeah.
And
I was in Phoenix last year. I gave after we spoke, I gave a speech in Phoenix and to a conference on procurement and supply chain. And it was the first time they'd ever had an optimist open the conference. And it was electric. It was one of those lovely things. And, I get people to stand up and shout out, "The leader is the person in my mirror." And then I ask them to look into the eyes of the person next to them. "The leader is the person in your mirror." And then they, of course, share what makes them optimistic. Now, when you've got 600 people, you have to use a mixture of them getting on tables, and we used a thing called Slido, so, what they were thinking appears on a screen behind me. And at the end, Kate, you would have loved it. You could not have scripted it. This tall African lady got up and said, "Look, I'm from Nigeria. I was born in a time of war. My name means the future will be better. I'm with you, Victor." And the crowd roared. And then a small lady, blonde, grabbed the microphone and said, "My name is Hope. And I'm with you too, Victor." So my memories of Phoenix are very, very favorable. So my impression of Arizona is it's quite a friendly place, and most people are like you. There's not that many Arizonans these days who were born in Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
The population of people who've moved there.
I don't live in Phoenix. I'm south of Tucson. And in my community, almost everybody is from somewhere else. So, but in different broadcasts that I've done this year, like we did one on COVID, and then I did one on suicide prevention. And I was talking to a suicide prevention expert who's also a comedian. And he had a hard time through COVID. First, at the beginning, he was on a cruise off the coast of China. Luckily, not one of the ones that, had everybody get COVID. But anyway, then he came back and COVID. And then he was in the fires that we had here. So he had a pretty, traumatic year. And he got into being a suicide prevention expert because of his own, suicide ideation and attempts. And so I asked him if the year with everything that had happened had been, harder and more stressful. And, if he'd had more negative thoughts. And he said, no, that actually he worried about the other people that weren't suicidal or didn't have mental disabilities, because he said he gets up every day and, it's a challenge to deal with life. So COVID wasn't that dramatic of a change. And I think people who have gone through a lot of adversity, really of any kind, they develop more resilience. And a part of that, I think, also is, now it's hard to say someone with suicidal thoughts is optimistic, but when they're dealing with it well, they are.
Because the definition of optimism, in some senses derives back from that English mystic, the oldest surviving book in English by a woman, Mother Julian of Norwich, who famously said, "All shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well." And she lived through the Black Death, which was a pandemic that killed 20% of the population. So, very deadly. And what's interesting is that the definition of optimism that's used by Harvard Health, by the US military, by Boston University, Brookings, is that optimism is a belief that everything will work out in the end. To which some clever people add, if it hasn't worked out, it's not the end.
Yes.
So when you believe that, your friend could easily be described as an optimist, because optimism is the underpinning of resilience. It's very hard to be resilient if you think things are turning to mud or to what we normally say. Whereas if you believe that persistence, that strengthening your mind, that doing the exercises that build your mental health, then you believe that everything will work out.
That's not entirely true, but from your perspective, I can see how it would be being an optimist. There's resilience, and then there's joyful resilience, and they're different, because there's resilience where people suffer and grind it out and get through it. That's hard.
Yeah. Most resilience is underpinned by a belief that things will get better. So I did an event with the Jewish community about 3 weeks ago, and there are a number of older people there who were young children, growing up in Germany during the war or pre-war. And all of them articulated this optimism that, it was grueling being in Germany as Hitler came to power, and, the stories of their parents and grandparents, but it was a belief that you would outlive Hitler, or that you would move to Australia or America or Israel. So even in the worst of circumstances, that resilience is underpinned by, if I keep going, it will get better. Now, there's no doubt there must be some people who can, as you say, grind it out with no belief that things will get better. But I think that's
with a sense of suffering that a lot of people have been able to overcome going through, like Nelson Mandela. I mean, in the worst of circumstances, he was an optimist. He had resilience, but it was a joyful resilience.
And he wrote his autobiography on toilet paper. But as he said, you keep your face to the sun and you keep walking forward. And there's a black supergroup out of Chicago called August Green that also has a contemporary song, which is, keep your face up to the sky. So, Mandela, in the midst of that suffering and the like, it was able to maintain that. Gandhi, as the English ridiculed him as that sort of fakir in a loincloth.
Mm-hmm.
But, he kept up that smile and he would meet with the British, ruling elite and would just persist with the message. So it's very powerful. And if you look at contemporary times, we've gone through this terrible period. Most of the psychological analysis says what people are yearning for are stories of optimism and hope. Disney and Coke and others have all produced research showing that's the case. Pantone today released their new color palette. And this, for the first time, they're going to have two colors. One is a yellow and one is a gray. So optimism built on a rock solid foundation is the way they've articulated it. McKinsey says that, all the great leaders are people who are infectiously optimistic. So not the big man at the podium making the big speech. It's the person who can ask his staff, his workers, what makes you optimistic? Iger, who retired after a hugely successful career at Disney, has a new book, his autobiography. And of course, like everyone these days, he's called upon to talk about the 10 great features of the contemporary leader. Well, number one is exactly, again, what you epitomized, Kate, infectious and realistic optimism.
Yes,
So
definitely.
no one wants a Pollyanna. No one wants someone who says that there's a silver lining in every dark cloud. But, it's the realization that the dark clouds will fly past and the sun will shine again tomorrow or the next day.
Yes, and the people that are optimistic, it isn't always like you say optimism, you ask about optimism, but a lot of those leaders, they just model optimism. So, like Barack Obama that's the type of leader he was.
Yeah, I had to go back to Clinton and George Bush Sr. Having met both of them, they look into your eyes, almost, the Indian concept of drishti. They must meet thousands of people every year or tens of thousands, but they've learned through that instant that they're with you to look into your eyes, to almost look into your soul and connect.
Yeah.
So there's that wonderful, they inspire you by their interest. And one of my gurus is a guy called John Hagel from Silicon Valley, who wrote the book, The Power of Pull. And he talks about the passion of the explorer. So, dare I say it, you think of Reagan, Clinton, George Bush Sr., Obama. When they met you, they asked really interesting and interested questions of you. And I may even be so bold, Kate, I know it's unfashionable in America these days, when I met Trump. In fact, in that short period that I was with him face to face, he was, again, intensely curious and asking good questions. So, even in the bleakest of American politics these days, I think one of the things that strikes me about your presidents is that they're actually very, very good people.
Hmm.
Their public image is quite different, but when you're with them, in the one-to-one.
Everyone has said that about Trump, is that he's very personable one-on-one.
Yeah.
I can't say the same for him in his political presentation. So.
No, I think I actually did a joke tweet the other day, Kate. I've been rereading the 1952 book, The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. And the reason I went back to reading it was there was a series of articles that either blamed him for Trump or that said that Trump had misinterpreted him. And there's this lovely expression in that book where Peale says, don't argue unless someone says something negative. then counter that with something positive. And I joked and I said, that must have been the sermon that Trump slept through.
Well, actually, he got his philosophy, he got his interpretation of that book from his father. And so he has a niece who's a psychologist, and she has interpreted how the family, you know, kind of digested that idea of positive thinking. And I guess the part that slipped through was, you know, like the grounding in reality, you know, like.
The appeal is also very strong. Well, what's interesting when you read back this 1952 book, because of course he had a huge career, you know, from the 1940s to the 1990s, and Clinton, when he died, Clinton made this very beautiful speech about him. But Peel was very much about, you know, if you're going to dream big dreams. You know, if you're going to pray big prayers. But it's quite modern because he talks about meditation and taking 15 minutes of silence every day. So I think, you know, those who wanted the sort of gospel of prosperity could extract that from him. But his actual writings and sermons were quite different. So it was very interesting character, particularly when you watch some of his old videos and the like. He was, again, a very charismatic speaker.
Yes, and he did what most of the people who espouse positive thinking did. You can't just have the thinking. You have to have practices and action behind it. And if you don't, it's just empty words. So
Neville Christie sent me an email the other day. He said, Victor, what is the difference between an optimist who doesn't act and a pessimist? Absolutely nothing, because pessimism paralyzes. And the optimist who just talks optimism rather than acting on that optimism actually has no greater impact on all. But I mean, that's one of my crusades is with the young. You see, the conversation about climate, for instance, is a paralyzing conversation. You know, it's destruction and tempest and hurricane. You know, this is all beyond the power of a 12-year-old to do something. But it's within the power of the 12-year-old to choose recycled or circular economy goods. It's within the power of the 12-year-old to plant a tree. It's within the power of the 12-year-old to catch a bus rather than being driven by mum or dad or walking around the block. And so, you know, I'm very much one where, you know, we're acting on climate change, we're acting on the circular economy, but it's personal action. It's not marching in the street saying, you, the government, should do something. As you know, mate, I urge everyone, in fact, all of your listeners can do this, anyone who uses red lipstick, go and graffiti your mirror with, the leader looks like the person in my mirror. And if you're a man and you don't use red lipstick, borrow it from a friend. And graffiti your mirror with, the leader looks like the person in my mirror. And again, you exemplify that, Kate. You know, it's this notion that too much of society now, when they watch the news, it's them. You know, the government should have done something 5 years ago, or a company should have done something 10 years ago. We should have all known about the effects of smoking 100 years ago. But, you know, the Chinese, I think, have a proverb, or someone Chinese had a proverb that said, the best time to plant a tree was 25 years ago, or it's today. Yeah. And I much prefer it's time to plant a tree today. And as we were talking earlier, I mean, we're one of the projects we're involved in on the water board that I'm on is, you know, we've got a big recycling plant in the outer suburbs. Next to it, we've built a waste-to-energy plant, you know, which is taking food waste and converting it to energy. Our next project is going to be green hydrogen. So using the water and the energy, splitting out the hydrogen and the oxygen. And of course, we've got factories around that want the hydrogen. What's interesting is that we will reduce the energy the energy input into the recycling plant by about 80% by using pure oxygen rather than air to clean up the sewage. And the other spin-off now is that we've actually got community groups wanting to take water and energy to grow community food and training people in horticulture on land that's otherwise within a buffer zone, because of the recycling plant and waste to energy. We'll now be growing vegetables for the community and training people to grow vegetables.
That sounds good.
We'll be zero carbon by 2025, and it hasn't required. We still produce some of the best drinking water in the world. We still take away people's sewage, but we're doing it in cleverer ways that are good for the planet and good for the people.
Yes, that's great. We're trying to do that too. There's some battles over it. As I kept saying earlier about everything, I don't understand, but there's some people who just really aren't in favor of that. So.
And people ask me about optimism and, how many, what about young children often say, what do you do, Victor, when someone's a pessimist and they attack you? And I say, well, look, there's 7 billion people on Earth. 20% of them, are either have a pessimistic mindset or are part of the pessimism industry. So I'm not going to win them over. But as people are open to the message and want, to make themselves more optimistic, we're here to help them. And we prompt them by asking them that question. What makes you optimistic? And I'm doing an event for the British government tomorrow. We did one for the New Zealand government. We've done them for state governments. We've done them in prisons and schools.
Yes.
Yeah, and the prisoners don't get to watch lots of news. So going to the prison and asking them what makes them optimistic is quite an eye-opening event for them.
Yes. So that's where your new habits of optimism come in. The animated clip or whatever story that you have, who is that aimed at, and what is it? What are you wanting it to achieve?
Yeah, so in my speeches, I always get lots of laughter. So particularly when we've had to do them on video, so the first habit is the habit of smiling. So I say to people, well, look at yourself now in the video, are the lips crinkled up a little bit? And, we talk about, I share some anecdotes, particularly about sort of all sorts of people, but smiling and then laughter. Now, of course, I'm of an age where most of my jokes are now sort of unacceptable. So I say, all right, we're just going to laugh. So we laugh and people feel that, their muscles releasing in their chest and their shoulders. And then the third one is to change greetings. I say to people now, don't ask anyone, how are you? In France and in Australia, the answer is usually not bad or not too bad. It's a wasted question and a wasted answer. So I say to people, you get a refund on my speech if you try this for a week and it doesn't work. And so when you say g'day or hello, instead of how are you, try out what's been the best thing in your day or what's good that's happening for you. So you bias the question to the positive right from the beginning. Now, if they say bloody nothing or bloody nothing, there's another question you've got to ask about what's going wrong. But for most people, it diverts it. Now, I did an interview in New Zealand recently where the guy told his listeners he'd been plagiarizing me for a year. That's not plagiarizing. Now, I'd like you to use it. But all his clients knew that when he walked into their office, he wanted to hear a story of hope and optimism from them, not some whinge or not some dismissive comment. So the habits of an optimist, we've had 14, now they've got 16 people, from children in the Australian National Boys Choir through to, you know, people like John Hagel from Silicon Valley. And each of them have given us 90 seconds on how to make an optimistic habit work, from gratitude to asking questions to smiling. And then we've created a cartoon character. The course is, unlike the Coursera courses, which typically take 20 listening to a lecture that was actually made for a lecture theatre, people can do the course in 50 minutes. It's fun. You know, they get little bits of feedback all the way along. So they can actually do the whole course and get a certificate in 50 minutes. Or they can take 50 years and it'll take a lifetime to do it. So it's about making it fun, making it easy, and particularly with New Year coming and people are thinking, what am I going to change for the new year? Really important to pick one or two habits that you can adopt and make it happen. Rather than, you know, how some people will write lists of everything they need to change, from losing 20 kilograms or 20 pounds to, you know, I will be a more efficient person. We decided we'd make it fun. So it's animated, there are people singing, it's highly expressive, and it's really suitable for anyone from probably a smart kid of 8 can make sense of it, through to, I think the oldest person who's done it now, when they put a note on it, was 94. Okay. So it's probably suitable from 8 to 108.
Okay.
It's about fun, it's about joy, it's about, you know, the smile on your face now. Even as you're thinking about it, you're smiling. And the notion of singing and dancing your way through optimism is a lot more fun than sitting in a lecture theatre.
Yes, well, I think people learning habits or to take action about something that they want or need to do is much more effective.
Well, you're an expert in this space. So, you know, it's tough work, and, you know, it requires one-to-one in many cases, but, yeah, a lot of people don't want to do that. So we thought, you know, there's people who can come to you and benefit from your great skills and expertise in helping people to ingrain habits, through the people who will pick it up, you know, by watching animations and cartoons and provocative questions.
Well, it's all a part of it. You know, like I do one-on-one coaching and hypnotherapy, but I also do things like this podcast and write blogs, and I'm writing a book and things like that, that are resources that people can go to and do on their own. And some people are never going to come to you one-on-one, but if your, you know, mission, hope, what you want to accomplish is for people to know something so that they can accomplish what they want to, then, you know, you're going to provide more than just the one-on-one counseling. My guest last week, he's a coach now, but he was never trained as a coach. He went through certain circumstances, and now he wants to help other people who've gone through those circumstances. And he basically got his education from going to YouTube videos and reading books and watching, you know, different experts in the field. And that kind of help, I think, is really valid for a lot of people.
Yeah. Now you're going to let us in. What's the new book?
Oh, okay. I'm collaborating with someone else, and it'll be Joyful Resilience, or about joyful resilience. I'm not sure that will be the title, but yeah. So I was
Make sure there's a chapter on optimism. We've got lots of quotable quotes on resilience and optimism we can give you.
Yes. Optimism and resilience are very related. So,
there's always the debate, is optimism the underpinning of resilience, or is resilience an underpinning of optimism? I go with the optimism is the underpinning of resilience.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a bit like hope and optimism.
Yes,
in some of the Christian churches, there's this view that you should have hope, and that optimism is to be poo-pooed. And I wrote an essay the other week in Thrive Global where I said you can actually have optimism, hope, and faith, and they actually go together really, really well.
Yes, and resilience is a part of all of that. So, but mostly my book is going to show that it isn't enough to be just resilient. You need to be joyfully resilient. I mean, and you can be joyfully resilient. I've been resilient and joyfully resilient, and joyfully resilient is better. So.
As the Dalai Lama would say, choose optimism. It feels better.
Yes, definitely.
No, joy. Someone who died this year was a lady who gave me very good advice. It was a lady called Dadi Janki, an Indian lady who died at the age of 103. And she was the head of the largest women-led religion on earth, which is the Brahma Kumaris, which is a Hindu group out of Mount Abu in India. They originally formed in Pakistan, and then after the separation of Pakistan and India, really almost as refugees, went to Mount Abu. And she gave me my rules of time management, Kate. We met back in the late 90s and said, "You're a busy sort of guy, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "Do you find time to meditate?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." She says, "But try this. Try to meditate 1 minute every hour. You won't remember every hour, but if you do 1 minute 8 times a day, at least it's 8 minutes of meditation." And but she gave me my rules of time management, Kate. And so the first one, if someone asks you to do something, her question was, will it bring you great joy? If so, accept the invitation. The second test is it something that will forward you or your organization? Say yes. Is it something you must do? Well, of course, that answers itself. Mm-hmm. But if it's something that doesn't bring you joy, doesn't advance, and isn't something you must do, don't do it. Everything else is a waste of time, according to her. But joyfulness was the first test.
Yes, definitely. So I have a question that might seem totally off subject to you, but I've been asking all my guests lately, so I'm going to ask you too. So what has surprised you most about life so far?
Life so far? Oh, gosh. Oh, God, I'm going to give you a long silence. So I'm a person who I take what comes. So for me, my lessons really go back 2 generations. So my grandparents were all living happy lives in Northern Europe. And then the Soviet invasion in 1940 threw their lives around. One grandfather was executed. Grandmother was sent to Siberia for a decade. The other 2 grandparents became refugees. So for me, you see what happened to them. Then they lived, through World War II. Then You know, my maternal side went to Australia. So for me, you know, life is full of changes and challenges. So for me, my whole life has been a journey of progress. So, you know, even though my mother was a refugee, my father died when I was very young. You know, she worked 3 jobs to keep we kids at school. You know, from then on, you know, as a young barrister, a trial attorney, I went into politics young. You know, politics has its biffs and buffs. Perhaps that was my greatest surprise, was in politics, that, you know, I didn't realize the extent to which there are groups of people who want to stymie other people who want to do good things. So if I go back, I think thinking over my whole life, maybe I went in a bit naive, that good ideas and good intentions were not enough. That there was always a group of people who were either jealous or opposed to you, that would use surreptitious means to stymie you. I suspect that was, if I go back through my whole life, that was the thing that surprised me the most. And then the other one was, we talked last time, when I was working in the Americas, so I worked right across North and South America, there was the positive view towards Australians. You know, this wonderfully positive stereotype to Australians. And then I've come to a third surprise. When I came back to Australia in 2015, I was surprised by the negativity. That Australians seemed to be the people that didn't understand the quality of Australian leadership. And I think Jesus, in one of his sermons, talked about the prophet is not recognized in his or her own land. So I suspect if I look back, those are probably the 3 surprises. And then, of course, like any bloke who's divorced, I was surprised that my marriage didn't last. But, you know, 40% of the population now go through that generally in the West. And, you know, it's you know, 10 years on, I'd probably do it all differently. But that was another thing that surprised me in my life. Was that what you were trying to get at? Is that the answer to the question?
There's no right answer, and everybody has given a different answer. That's what the person from last week said. They gave their answer, and then they said, now I wonder what everybody else said. And everybody,
because I have never been asked that question before. It's a completely unique, and you didn't prepare me for it, so it's, because otherwise you prepare these answers and it all sounds very schmick. And you've actually helped me with my thinking processes to go through 3 generations of my family and contemporary society. So that's a wonderful question, Kate. Have you ever seen the film Lost Horizon, the 1973 version, with the music of Burt Bacharach and Peter Finch and Michael York? It wasn't a success in the box office. It was released because it's about Shangri-La and, you know, based on the book by James Hilton, Lost Horizon. And it was at the end of the Vietnam War, so its timing was probably wrong. But there's a song in that called Answer Me a Question. And the words of the song go, answer me a question, right or wrong. You can answer with a question, right or wrong. Even though the answer may be wrong, your question may be right. Answer with a question. And that's the brilliance. Last year I met a man called Lane Glenn, who runs a community college outside of Boston. And he's a great advocate for appreciative inquiry. You know, where you ask questions and it's always an and rather than a but, is the way I characterize it. And so I love your questions, Kate, and that is brilliant. I may, in fact, add that to my repertoire.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, but I have a feeling that it'll be part of some type of production going forward. I asked that question of myself a while ago, and after I answered it, I wanted to know other people's answers too. So
I reckon there's a lifetime in asking that question, Kate. There's books and movies that could come out of that.
Yeah. So, what's on the horizon for 2021 for the Center for Optimism, or what you're hoping and planning to do?
So number one is obviously leading into New Year. We've got our Habits of the Optimist, which we're letting people know about. We're still running a series of events up till Christmas. After Christmas, we'll be doing some seminars on the why and how of optimism as people are leaving, even though that's normally the holiday period. I know some people will already be pre-planning. I'm going to do a check-in on New Year's Day. You know, people who want to beam in at 5 o'clock on the 1st of January. You know, what about, how's my hangover?
5 o'clock Australia time?
Yeah. I might do it again, American time on the 1st as well. And just let people beam in and just share how bad their hangover is and how they're feeling.
Well,
and then looking into the new year.
Time they won't be there yet. So
No. So what's right now? This is a really good time. After 3 in the afternoon, your time is, after 10 a.m. my time. You know that old saying I use, Kate, the world will never end because it's always tomorrow in Australia.
Exactly.
So thinking ahead, the things we need to improve on, number one is to use our volunteers better. That requires a whole set of organisations. So it's been too much based around me and not enough around the others. So we've always been about empowering the people who are in there to spread optimism more. So number one, I'd like to use our volunteers better. Number two, our workshops are spreading well. And again, it's for instance, we've got members in France and elsewhere. So to let other people do the workshops in other countries, rather than me beaming into London or me beaming into Phoenix or going to Phoenix, having our members everywhere from Bulgaria to Swaziland doing that. Those would be two. And then there's probably my book needs to be updated. So whether it'll be Optimism, the Winehouse, 2nd edition, or whether there's a new book. And then we're doing an Advent calendar at the moment, Kate. So whether the Advent calendar then leads to, other religious festivals, like Hanukkah has lots of optimism bits to it and the like. And then, we've been playing around with doing an app, and we've had a couple of false starts on doing an app that'll empower people. Now, again, a bit like Zoom, are people apped out? Are there sort of too many apps these days? So, maybe there's an app. And then I've been hosting a number of technology conferences, both cybersecurity, innovation, invention. So whether we ourselves start to use artificial intelligence and machine learning more. And so I've started to ask my friends who are much more expert at me in machine learning and artificial intelligence, how we can use those to help the world become more optimistic. So those are a few of the thoughts, yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, so we'll probably sit down and we'll probably do our own, because in Australia, it's a long summer holiday here. As you know, it gets pretty hot, a bit like Arizona. So early January is always a good time, get out of the heat a little bit and redo your strategy and redo your business plans. So I'll probably have more to tell you maybe the end of January.
Okay.
Because our business year actually goes July to June, not January to December like you.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not sure why there's the difference in history on that at all. I must try and work that out one day.
Yeah, I don't know either. I didn't, that was something that hadn't occurred to me really, that other countries might have a different calendar, but why not?
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, it's around climate as well, because we work, you guys are, all your students are off school for most of July and August, and, our kids are hard at work and, they're sunbaking through December, January.
Yes. So one more question. If you could leave the listeners with one thought from today's show, what would you want that to be?
I'd like them to ask themselves what makes you optimistic and write it down. And then if you've got a husband or wife or children or grandparents, go out and ask them. And then if you run a company or you run a business or you run a school, the next board meeting or executive meeting you chair, don't do it without notice, put it on the agenda. Open the meeting by asking everyone, going around the table, what makes you optimistic? And don't restrict it to work. You will learn so much about your colleagues when they tell you they're optimistic about children, or they're made optimistic by their faith, or they're made optimistic by singing. So that would be it. It's the question, what makes you optimistic? Both asking yourself, but then starting to ask other people. And you'll be amazed that every time you do it, you will be uplifted and they will be uplifted.
How did I know that was going to be your question, Victor?
You're prescient, mental telepathy, Kate. Maybe you even hypnotized me across the screen.
So if people want to get in touch with you and find out more about the things that you're doing, or join the Center for Optimism, how would they get in touch?
So if they just Google Victor Perton, they can see that at the bottom of the screen, just Victor Perton and just Optimism, or Centre for Optimism. You can use either spelling. In England and Australia, we use RE for centre, but if you do ER, you'll find it as well. So either Google Victor Perton or Google the Centre for Optimism, and you get a free subscription. And we are now the biggest website in the world on optimism. And you'll like this, Kate. The most visited page from Google searches, what would you think it would be?
Hard to tell. People.
It's so funny. Our most popular page is Mother Julian of Norwich. Really? All shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well. The second most popular, in contrast, is the Italian Marxist Gramsci. So optimism is there for the believers and the atheists, and we've got every form of religion, faith, and belief in between. So it's a lot of fun. When people Google in, they will find all sorts of things, all sorts of gems.
Okay, well, I'm glad that we caught up on what you're doing. I see that you've had a really busy year, and so that the question that I had is optimism on the rise?
Now that is a fantastic question, which we could take another hour, Kate. So the evidence is that in the Western world, optimism is in decline. And you see it in the Asian countries passing Europe and America in innovation and invention and even entrepreneurship, because all of those are underpinned. So the decline in optimism in the West is, interestingly enough, countered by the rise of optimism in Asia and North Africa, and in fact even in places like Nigeria. So if you look at Australia and New Zealand and the United States, optimism is on the decline. If you look at Africa, the Middle East and Asia, it's on the rise. So in the balance, it's probably on the increase, and it's up to people like you and me, Kate, and this conversation we're having today to stimulate others to do it. So in my little patch, I go one by one, helping people to become more optimistic. And I think with the passion of people like you and me, it will rise again.
I think it is rising now. I think after this year, I think people want to feel optimistic.
And we'll give it a red hot go.
Yes, we will. So thank you so much for being here today and talking about this. And I hope you have a really nice holiday.
I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And just being with you, Kate, it just, your whole aura and imagery makes people happier, more positive, and ready to go out there and change the world. So I'm going out with even greater energy after having this conversation with you. And for that, I'm extraordinarily grateful. And that question that I'd never been asked before.
Oh, well, thank you for answering it. So we have another great show planned for next week. Next week, my guest will be Dr. Bindu Babu, and she is an integrative medicine doctor and a celebrity life coach. And she does Reiki and quantum healing. And she's also a speaker and an author. And I've had her on Embrace Change with Kate a couple of times for shows on dealing with narcissistic abuse. But her book that she just wrote is about healing from narcissistic relationships and abuse. And so she is going to be my guest talking about that. So be sure to tune in. That'll be 3 p.m. Pacific time next Tuesday. So have a great week. And I'm just going to say bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Soul Fire Wisdom with Kate Olson. We hope you enjoyed the show. If we made you laugh, brightened your day, or sparked a new thought, we have succeeded in our mission. Join us next time when we'll share more secrets and truths and all the magic of transformation that is the journey to Soul Fire Wisdom. Always remember, be fierce in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire.